Welcome to the Winning Edge Investments webinar. We're joined by Australian Bloodstock Director Luke Murrell, who provides the highly profitable Luke Murrell's tips for winning edge investments. Thanks for joining us, Luke.
Yeah, no problem, bro.
So today we're going to talk about the Cups. They're less than 2 months out until the Caulfield Cup and then not long until the Melbourne Cup. You've put together this really helpful guide for the Cups, which you can see on the screen here. And it's especially useful if you want to get an idea if there's a particular horse which is coming to Australia, or if there's a horse that you think is not going well enough. Firstly, how is the Cup shaping up this year? Is it looking to be a strong year, or how do you assess it?
I don't think so, and for that reason, like I look at most racing around the world, and Japan, England, Ireland, there's a real lack of quality older sort of stayers, and I suppose we've seen the last couple of years. We've had a couple of 3-year-olds win the Melbourne Cup, and that's probably a result of there is none of those quality hardheads around, whether they've been retired to start or they've just fallen by the wayside form and injury-wise. It's an interesting year because obviously everyone wants to talk about cross-counter and whatnot, but I think it's a very even year, and it's a year that there's probably at this far out, there's a number of live chances where in previous years you could have been a bit harsher and narrowed them down a bit easier.
And so you won the race in 2014 with Protectionist, and I guess you've been on the hunt to win it again ever since. You obviously put a huge amount of research in, and you've got some really unique access and insights. Where do you think the winners are likely to come from this year?
Look, I think if we're sort of focusing, say, on a Melbourne Cup, there's one tried and true method that anyone who's having a bet, I think, must implement, and it's the old Bart Cummings rule. They must have 10,000 metres of race form in their legs in that preparation. So if you look back through probably the last 15, 20 years, I would say off the top of my head, I haven't got the info in front of me, but maybe 2 or 3 winners in the last 20 years haven't met that qualification clause. Off the top of my head, it was Green Moon and Fioronte, and both particular races were run at almost barrier trial speed. So I think, a normal Melbourne Cup is a genuine gut-busting staying type test, and generally the best stayers do perform well. But obviously to win any race, you need a good platform. And I think, especially from an Australian trainer point of view, there's so many of our Australian horses aren't really suited to the Melbourne Cup, and you can almost pen them this far out regardless of their form. If they don't tick that box first and foremost, I think they're next to no hope. And I think that's a real good edge from a punting point of view that you can use to maybe get a bit of value and a few extra prices this far out, because as you'll see when we go through here, there's a number of horses in the market, and admittedly their percentage is ridiculous, but there's a number of horses in the market that just won't be in the race, won't be coming, and even this far out, no hope of going to be in the race. So to me, that's a really good edge and something where you might be able to take advantage of.
Yep. So essentially you could form your own market by taking out, a huge market percentage of the ones who won't be coming or simply aren't good enough.
Yeah, 100%. And obviously, I think we did it last year. We'll probably do it again this year. We'll get together a bit closer to the time when we've got a bit more idea of the field whittled down. But, if you think about it logistically, you've got horses in Europe now that are having their 3rd and 4th run of the preparation versus their, say, competition here in Australia. They haven't even had their first run of the preparation. So I know who I'd rather be on, and that's a horse that's fit and healthy and has already got the miles in the legs versus a horse that realistically has to be jammed just to make the race. And I think that's why it's so hard for these Australian trained horses to actually do anything in the race.
Well, let's kick it off with last year's winner, Cross Counter. What do you make of him?
Look, I think last year in my ratings it was a particularly weak year. And if you remember the race, he actually got skittled on the first turn. And I think in any other year, horses like that, you're just immediately out of play. But I've got to say, I thought they were pretty much walkers last year. And I think that was the reason he was able to storm home. But look, he's gone on it. He went super in Dubai. And recently he's got that Stradivarius form, which is the best form in the world. He's a definite chance, but you look at some of the records that these horses have to beat to win with a big weight in the Melbourne Cup, and it's pretty daunting. And if the handicap is fair income, he has to carry 60 kilos, if not more. And I just can't see a horse like him being able to do that when, to be honest, there's been better horses than him have had lesser weight and still haven't been able to win back-to-back. And, yeah, $15, I'd take $15 if the race was tomorrow and it was here, but I would be surprised. I know there's lots of talk that he's coming and everything, but I'll be really surprised that he does come, to be honest, because I just don't think he can back that up.
And we're sort of going through in almost market order here. So DXB?
Yeah, if he came, I'd be absolutely – you could nearly declare him as the winner, but he's got the Stradivarius form. He's got a high rating, but he's only won a Group 3, so I think he'd be fairly well treated by Mr. Carpenter. And but my mail is I don't think they'll be coming for the race, and therefore you can't take $26 about a horse that's even unlikely to get on the plane, even though he's probably got that class edge on this whole field.
There's a lot of $26 hopes which probably aren't coming, and even more which are 51. So there's a bit of a
and I think 10 and 15 years ago, these type of horses were 100 to 1 and 80 to 1 and those type of things, and it was tempting. But the bookies don't seem to offer you a great deal of odds at the moment on those types of horses, but they still obviously find the mugs to pile into them. So I think as much this little chart is to help people avoid the horses that are just no hope of coming or unlikely to come. Then you have got a little bit of an edge.
Yep. And Falcon 8, he's a horse you tried to buy?
Yeah, really like this horse. The backstory to the horse, they tell me that 12 months ago he couldn't even beat the Clerk of the Course, and they give him time and further time, and all of a sudden he's developed, and I loved his run the other day. Yeah, it was only a listed race, but I would have been prepared to pay big money for the horse. But the male he's mentally very immature, and the owners want to put him away. And if they do come, it'll be next year, and they're definitely not coming. So he's one you can put a line through straight away.
And Ispellini, he's got the Dubai form. You're keen to avoid him?
Yeah. Look, those Dubai horses, some say they get an unfair advantage, and I'll probably leave it at that. But needless to say, you don't want to really be backing any Dubai form that are chic horses. I would be, if there was the odd raider has gone there from Japan and done well, and England has done well, but Dubai form generally just put a line through. It's only really good for Dubai.
And Marmello's the second. You go on, mate?
Sorry, he's just not good enough anyway. His very best run's still not good enough for a Melbourne Cup.
Yep. And Marmello, he's a second favourite. Sorry, he's the joint favourite with Cross Counter.
Yeah, I think part of the reason he is favourite is everybody knows him and remembers him. Is he a genuine, he's not on the same planet quality-wise as Cross Counter, but I think he's that favourite. Look, if there was a pecking order in strength for the stayers at the moment, it'd be Ireland, England, Japan, Australia, France. And he's got the French form, and the French form's pretty much legless. He's got wet tracks recently. He just recently won the Kerguelen on the weekend. He got to the right part of the track, and it was just a race devoid of quality. And I thought he was a great – he had every chance last year in the Cup, given the run of the eventual winner, and the fact he couldn't get it done. He's not getting any better. My ratings, he's 3 to 4 lengths down, and I'm more than happy to ignore him.
Yep. Master of Reality?
Yeah, he was an interesting one. Lloyd Williams bought him out of France. They paid a big amount for him. He raced quite well early in the season. He had one good run there that sort of said, oh, he's a decent horse. But since then, he just looks an absolute one batter. He really needs 2 miles. It wouldn't surprise me if they kept him there and didn't come. But thing that you'll see, there's a number of Frankels been nominated for the race this year. I'd say 99% of them won't even make the field. And if they do, they need an absolute wet track. And we saw last year we had torrential rain at that Flemington course, and it's like a drain, the whole course. It didn't hold any moisture for long, and some of these horses are out and out wet trackers. I just don't think they're worth backing, and I don't rate him, to be honest.
Yeah, it's a big risk to come here for months and get a track that's too firm.
Yeah, and like our probably our slow trackers, they're good to firm. So if they're not handling their good to firm, they've no hope to handle ours.
Yep.
And some of these horses, like the staying races, they need that heavy track to bring the field back to them. And I think he's one of them, to be honest. But look, he's got Irish form and it's okay, but you do need a turn of foot. Like, you know, every winner we've ever seen's had a turn of foot, basically. And if you haven't got that, I don't think you're any hope.
And Tosen, he's one of Australian Bloodstocks, isn't he?
Yeah, look, we bought him last year and he got a little virus, so we didn't end up coming. My big issue is he's a bit of an old man now. This time last year, he was rated the 2nd or 3rd best stayer in the world. So if he arrived rock hard fit and in good form, I'd take $12 today. But coming off the little virus that he had, and he's just had minor little setbacks. He raced first up the other day in a listed race where on paper he should have killed them. But Andreas did tell us, he was nowhere near ready. He's coming out of that run really good. He's going to run in a listed race in 2 weeks' time and then head to a Group 3. If he won that Group 3, I would be truckloading him from a Melbourne Cup point of view because that'll tell me that he's going good. If he's a bit placing and not really dominating there, I'll be worried about him from an owner point of view.
And Django Freeman?
So he was bought by Aussies at the start of the year. He's a German 3-year-old. Now, you might have read that Mr. Carpenter's changed the conditions slightly to make it less appealing for the European 3-year-olds. German horses have a very good reputation, but the last couple of years, the German horses in general have been pretty ordinary. He looks good on paper. He looks very consistent, but I can tell you he's been very wound up for those 3-year-old races with no improvement left in him, and it'll just be a bridge too far. He doesn't have any type of Group 1 or Group 2 rating next to his name at all, despite running second in the Derby. And I think he'll be a good Group 3, Group 2 horse over here, but definitely not a Melbourne Cup or a Caulfield Cup chance, in my opinion.
And Japan likely not to come?
Yeah, love this horse. If he'd come, I'd be all over him, but I think they'll go to an Arc or one of those better races and leave him over there. I just think he's one of those horses that they'll consider an Arc or American-type run, and he won't come.
Yep. And King of Lee runs?
Yeah, there's a trainer over there that would be, I think, the best trainer in the world. He's a freak. Every horse that's ever left his stable, I find, has never, ever improved. He ran, you would have noticed him, he ran on the weekend. He ran okay, but he was probably a listed to Group 3 horse over there, and I think that's all we'll find him out to be here. And he won't be good enough to make the race unless he won an exempt race, but on his ratings, he's definitely not good enough, and happy to be against him.
And Spanish Mission likely not to come to Australia this year?
Yeah, he's owned by Team Valor and what's his name? The Honourable Earl Mack is the bloke's name, and he's a really, really nice horse. I don't think they're coming this year. I have had somebody message me and say that's not definite yet. He's a nice horse. He's progressive. If he did come, he probably would be one I would be half tempted to relook at, but I'd want to know that he's on the first shipment. And given he won't run between now and I think it's the 12th of September is the very first shipment, I'd just wait and get confirmation. He's one of those ones I'm on the fence with, only because I don't think he will come. But if he did, well, possibly you could reconsider him.
And a couple of the Aussies, Steel Prince, Surprise Baby, Very Elegant.
Yeah, Steel Prince, that was an amazing. I think it was the Andrew Ramsden when him and Surprise Baby cleared out. They were fantastic sort of efforts. But again, they're Australian horses. And you've got to think he hasn't had a run since then. So that means he's had a spell and a break, and he's going to be racing horses against much better quality, and he's just not good enough. He's a really good horse, but he's not a Melbourne Cup horse or a Caulfield Cup horse.
And Surprise Baby's one of the...
Yeah, I reckon he's probably with one of the best trainers in Australia. He seems to be an absolute freak. How he won that Adelaide Cup was just beyond me. So for him to do that says that he's a bit of a freakish horse. I think a place like Betfair and those type of places, you're definitely going to get better odds than what you might do with some of the bookmakers. But he would be one where the trainer's proven that the horse can handle it and he's good enough to do it. So I sort of don't want to rule him out, but I certainly don't want to take $21 or $26 or whatever the quote is around about him at the moment either. Sort of, just want to be on the fence there with him.
And Very Elegant, she's the Caulfield Cup favourite.
Yeah, look, she's obviously got an absolute massive boom on her. I personally don't see where it's justified. We all know her, she can over-race and she's not the most tractable. And for a Caulfield Cup and Melbourne Cup, you can't do anything wrong and you've got to switch off and relax. And she's never shown signs of that. She looks like she's that skinny. She doesn't have a shadow. So all those things to me count against getting a good long prep out of these horses and then peaking them for a Caulfield or a Melbourne Cup. If you had to have her, it'd be a Caulfield Cup, but I think she should be 200 to 1 for a Melbourne Cup, and I couldn't have her at that. Interesting, she goes around this weekend and is going to be in the market, and I'll probably give her some hope this weekend, but definitely not when you have to stretch these type of horses out. I didn't think her Oaks victory rated very good at all. So for me, she's got no substance to her staying form. She beat a couple of 3-year-olds, yippee, but it was a long time ago since Ethereal and those type of horses have been able to do that. And you just got to take those type of horses on because they're not going to have the grounding and they're not going to be good enough.
And you've got Broome, likely not to come?
Yeah, I think he'll be another one that heads to the Arc. He's a ripping horse, that horse, and he'll win a lot of money. Him and Japan are two that you should follow if you follow European racing. They're really good horses, but I don't think they'll be coming. I'm nearly adamant they wouldn't bring. They don't bring their very best horses. Adelaide, when he come, was always a third or a fourth or a fifth tier type horse, and he's a very good horse, but he wasn't nowhere near their top horse. And history says they don't bring their top horses, so they won't bring him.
Yep. Communicator.
I was really disappointed with him. He ran in a Group 1 probably 2 weekends ago in Germany. They went really slow and it was a sit and sprint. But 12 months ago, his form was just, he was a really top horse, but he's just racing very tired. And I think it'd be unlikely. The fact he couldn't put him away in Germany says they wouldn't waste him and bring him to Australia. I don't think he'll come at all.
And Finch is hard in the market for both the races.
Yeah, just have no idea why. He's a real one batter. I think he ran 4th last year in, like I said, a cup that I didn't really rate. He's obviously had a serious injury because we haven't seen him since. I saw his trial the other morning in Sydney, but again, how does a horse that hasn't raced for 12 months, now with a new trainer, effectively starting from scratch off a serious injury, run top 3 in a cup? I think you're 1,000,000 to 1, and I just don't give him any hope, to be honest. His French form was always suspect at the best, and I think he's quite flattered that he ran so close in a cup last year.
Yep. Ghostwatch?
Yeah, I'd be just watching, the Godolphin and the Andrew Bensley of the world sort of tweets here. If this horse came, he'd be an absolute sensation. But he's obviously had an injury, and on that, I'd be wanting to be against him. But he's such a good horse. He would be one I could nearly back to defy the whole 10,000 metres in their legs. But again, you're not really getting a great premium for a horse that hasn't raced in 12 months at $26. Ability-wise, if the race was tomorrow and he was fit and healthy, I'd be all over him. But, yeah, happy to be against him until you actually see him run in 2019.
And Goldmount's one you give a chance, but you'd like to see some rain.
Yeah, he was supposed to head to the Ebor. He was previously in England called, from memory, a horse called Primitivo, and I loved him then, and they paid massive money for him for Hong Kong, and he went over there and did well. And the owner, Hong Kong bloke, has sent him back to a guy called Ian Williams, who's a bit of a character himself and can really train. But he's quite a small horse. He'd be probably 15.2, and he's got this big bendy knee action. So he'd need a proper wet spring carnival. But if he came and we got that, he would be one I'd elevate. Just the fact that he's a bit of a midget and he's a wet tracker at $26, you're not really getting much of a premium. On the flip side, for those guys that like to trade, I think he'll line up in the Melbourne Cup and he'll start shorter than $26, I'm pretty confident of. So there might be something where you could crunch with him, but there's not a lot of fat there. I think he'd start sort of 15-1 in a Melbourne Cup. I don't think he'll run again. He may run in a Caulfield Cup, and he is a really good horse. You have to give him that. He's a proper horse, but there's just a couple of little things that I don't love about him. But at least you know he's going to come, and I think he'll trade shorter than the 26. So, Betfair again might be a place where you can get a few extra points.
Yep. Kew Gardens?
Yeah, just he's a good, tough horse, but I don't think he'll come. And I haven't loved his form this year either, so happy to be against him.
Lucario?
Yeah, I know Andreas has a massive, massive opinion of the horse. He's a German horse. He won the German Derby. We actually had him bored, and then the owner changed his mind at the last minute. He's a ripper horse, but he won't come. The owner's got no interest in Australia, and he just won't come. So he's a waste of time backing him.
And a Prince of Arran not going well enough?
No, definitely not. Ran super in the Melbourne Cup, and you have to remember the Melbourne Cup is a real graveyard for horses post running there. And his first run in Dubai was okay. His second run was legless, and then I think he got beat 30 or 40 lengths the other day at Goodwood. He's due to run this weekend in the Ebor. It's a real hot Ebor. The Ebor will be a hotter field than, say, the Caulfield Cup this year. So that'll be a good indicator, but no, definitely not. I think he's that price based on people will remember him and they think they'll get some mug money.
And Ashram, need a big price for someone to buy him?
Yeah, I didn't mind the horse. He's run last start. He improved, I reckon, 6 or 7 lengths. So it's got me stuffed how he did it. He is a lightly raced horse. Andreas Waller trains him as well. I know they've knocked back some big money. And again, this will sound funny for the Australian owners, but the people in Europe don't really consider Australia that much. If they want to go and race for the big prize money, for some reason they love going to Canada or America. And he's just not the type of connections that'll be likely to come. So I wouldn't take, probably 500-1 him coming. So I'd ignore him.
And it sends shivers up my spine to say Latrobe after the Trap for Fools event last time. But what do you think about him?
Probably more so given how Trap for Fools has gone since as well.
I don't know.
But he obviously owned by Lloyd. Even though it probably wasn't much of a race, that McKinnon that he missed out on, he's done okay this season, and the longer the season's gone on, the better he's gone. He won a Group 3 from memory last run against a horse called Guaranteed, who's a decent enough horse. The run prior was at the Curragh, and for those guys that are looking at their form this year, the Curragh has been like Moonee Valley on steroids. It's just been ridiculously on speed and fencing run. So he has had that favour, but I actually think he's going okay. And at the $26, you'd think he will be coming. And he'd be the type of horse I'd be probably a little bit more interested in a Caulfield Cup for. But I think Melbourne Cup might stretch him too much. But from a Caulfield Cup point of view, I think he's one of the better bets at $26.
That's good to hear if I can bring myself to back him again. Mr. Quickie, he's one of the better locals.
Yep. I reckon he's a really underrated horse, this horse. They've done exceptionally well how they've placed him. Look, he's qualified for everything due to his exploits and how tough he was. Just I always have a concern. Horses that had such a deep and tough campaign as like he had, can they come up again? Most I find don't, but if he did, he would be one of the better locals just because he's got a bit of X factor and he's actually got some ratings there that aren't too far off some of these better horses. So I don't really want to take $15 at Caulfield Cup though, and the $51. So he's one of those ones I could take at a price, but probably not what he is at the moment.
And Mugatoo's in the paddock?
Yeah, I bought him. He's one that I'd be wanting to back for a Sydney Cup. He's a serious horse, his horse. He just had a little issue, so we've pulled up stumps and we'll see him in the autumn.
And the Japanese horse, Chestnut Coat?
Yeah, he got lapped last year. Gone are the days when the Japanese stays were absolute superstars. They've got all mile 2000 horses now, so I want to be with them if they come here for mile and 2000 metre races, but this horse is just a common horse over there at the staying trip, and they're pretty ordinary over there at the moment as stayers, so definitely not.
And Wells Fargo, he's an interesting horse.
Yeah, love this horse. His form last year, he would be the horse I'd be telling everybody to pile into. He had an injury. I'm not exactly sure what it was, but he come back and won a listed race from memory and rated exceptional. And then they threw him in the deep end against Stradivarius at Goodwood. And look, he wasn't the only horse at Goodwood to fail, but he got beat 40 lengths or something ridiculous. So he was due to run this weekend in the Ebor. I don't know whether they do or they don't. But if you could see another good run between now and the first shipment, I'd be wanting to be with this horse definitely. But until I see that, you have to say he's got to be a cripple or something's not right. So you want to be against him that way.
And Mirage Dancer?
Yeah, bought by local guys. So I suppose the plus is you'll know he'll be in both races. He's qualified, but he's one of those European horses. He's a good horse in Europe, but he's one of these horses I think he'll come down here and the ambulance will hit him. He's very... He could run him into the ground, but our Australian races aren't run where they take off at the 1400 and make it a sustained run. They're more tactical. They're more sit and sprint, and he just doesn't have any of that aspect. And I think it's a myth that the Australian trainers train speed into their legs. So, look, he might start shorter than $26 Caulfield Cup Day, but personally I doubt it. That it'd want to be a weak field. And so I just don't see any benefit in backing him. I just don't think he's the right horse, and there's no real advantage to be with him.
Old Persian, or have we missed Nagano Gold?
Yeah, Nagano Gold, he's a number. More sort of suspect, dodgy form, and again, wrong connections that I don't think they'd even consider Australia. They'd be lucky to know where it is on the map. So I wouldn't like him. Old Persian, though, he is a proper horse. He was in that Communique race in Germany, and they got towed up by a French stayer who's not in the top 10 stayers in France. So, as I said, German stayers at the moment are pretty ordinary. But I think they come home on my clock at about 34-1, over 2,400 for the 600-metre mark. So it's probably a race that wouldn't have suited him, but he is a really classy horse. And again, being a sheep mow horse, if you could follow them on Twitter and Bensley, if you knew he was coming, I would be with this horse heavily for both races. He's a really good horse, even though he's some of his better runs were in Dubai. He had really good form last year around Ghostwatch and Supernova, who we might remember that Hawks has got. It kicks off tomorrow in the Rolly Mile. So, he's one that you could entertain, and he'll start a lot shorter than that if he does come.
And Ra Atoll?
Yeah, he's a horse I loved last year, and I actually vetted him at the sales last year, and he got sold for £40 or something, which is no money, but it was because he was a train wreck. Now, he ran first up in Germany and killed him, and it was an excellent effort. He went to America and got lapped, and then he ran the other day at the Curragh on a biased track and ran okay. The guy that owns him is a billionaire. I just don't see he will come. When I made some inquiries about the horse earlier this year, and he was wanting to tell me that he was considering it, but I felt that was just to try and get a bigger offer out of us. But, yeah, I don't think he'll come, to be honest.
And Raheem House is one you've recently bought into, and he runs in the Ebor Saturday. Is that right?
Yeah, he's a brother to Shraro, who won the Sydney Cup of ours. He's a 5-year-old, hasn't had a lot of racing. He was with a guy called Brian Moon, whose career strike rate, he's a good trainer, but his career strike rate's about 9%. He had a very indifferent season last year behind horses like Torsador and Raheen House, where he started, Torsador and Communique, where he started favourite, but he disappointed. So they've moved him to William Haggis, and William Haggis' career strike rate's about 23 or 24% off the top of my head. And the horse has probably improved on my ratings, probably 4 to 5 lengths. He's second favourite this weekend in the Ebor. He'll like firm ground, but I like him more on a dead to slow track. And at $51, I think he'll run super this weekend in the Ebor. Then he'll run Caulfield Cup, Melbourne Cup, and I can see him starting $15 in a Caulfield Cup and, 15, 20 to 1 in a Melbourne Cup. So the $51 on offer is, I've already had quite a few doubles into him. I think he's a really good chance.
And Southern France?
Yep, won a really good race just this week. I just don't think he'll come. I'm told he's got a lot of issues. But, again, he's one of Aiden's. I'm told Aiden might only bring 3 or 4 this year across all the races, and Godolphin might be the same. So I'm very loath to want to pile into those two organisations' horses until I know they're coming. If he came, I'd want to be with him for sure. He's a proper horse.
And Way to Paris, there's a couple of which you think won't come here. Way to Paris and Zabil Prince. Called to the bar.
Yep, so just quickly, Way to Paris, good older horse from France. He just won't come. The bloke's 90 and the trainer doesn't speak a word of English, so they won't come. Zabil Prince won't be good enough. Called to the bar is good enough, but they reckon he's a cripple, so he won't come. Crystal Ocean will go to the Arc, so he's just making up numbers there in the...
He runs tonight in the Jubilee?
Yeah, he does, yeah. So, and look, he'll probably win that. He ran second to Enable, give her a fight the other day, and he's probably the best English hope in the Arc along with Enable. Jack Finnenbar, I don't think, would come. Ditto South Pacific. And he hasn't qualified either. So we're now starting to get into some of these horses that haven't qualified or, for example, Too Darn Hot's retired with a tendon injury, like they're having a laugh there, the bookies. Thomas Hobson's a really tough horse. I just don't think he's likely to come. To say that, though, the Connections have bought a few that I didn't think had come in the last couple of years. And he has to be one of the toughest horses. So he's probably a horse you'll get 400 or 500 to 1 on Betfair. You could have $5 on him because, there won't be many come that are fitter or tougher than him. So he's got some hope that way, I suppose. But you can't have them all. And, yeah, I'd be penning him being a 9-year-old.
Might as well keep ripping through him if you want.
Yep. Weekend, he's a bit like Mirage Dancer. He's a nice enough horse. He's in the Ebor this weekend, but I don't think he can get warm in the Ebor, and he's more of a European horse, so happy to pen him. I really loved this Doretto last year, but he's obviously gone amiss. And now that he's come up through an Aussie training style, even though the trainer's more of a European trainer, you got to be against these horses that haven't had a rock solid sound 6 or 12 months under their belt. This horse, Ladon DV, is definitely coming, but he's not qualified, and he's just not good enough. He doesn't have any ratings to back him up, and I just don't know why he's even on the list. Twilight Payment's a really nice horse. He's another Irish horse. He'd be a Caulfield only type horse. He won't get the trip. He's by Teofilo. He won't get the trip in a Melbourne Cup. But the guy that owns him's a bit of a grumpy old bugger, and he rarely travels his horses abroad. I don't think he'd be bringing him. Baghdad's another nice horse. He's in the Ebor as well this weekend. Probably give him some hope this weekend in the Ebor. But, look, he's another Frankel, and most of them are wet tracks, so I'm happy to be against him at this early stage until you knew he was coming. Horse like Durston run really good again, but he seems to be a bit of a non-winner, this horse, and he just might be 12 months away. He's not quite strong enough. So I'd be surprised if he come. He's owned by a syndicate. I know they're keen to try and sell him to the Aussies, but so far no one's been silly enough to buy him yet. But look, he's a nice horse, but 12 months away. Count Octave, he just trialled ordinary the other day. He had a serious issue, which is why we haven't seen him race in last year's Cup. And he never had any form over there, and it's certainly not going to be good enough to win a Melbourne Cup. And, yeah, getting to the last few, I suppose. First 11's owned by Juddmonte. They generally don't like racing their horses in Australia. They've had a couple of bad experiences, so I don't think he'll come. He's also wants a wet track. The next horse, that is another French horse. He looks very consistent on paper, and I'm sure people will get interested in him. But the connections have got no interest in coming. I made a little inquiry there this time last year. They said they've got no interest. Making Miracles, he's in the Ebor. He's just snuck in. He's the bottom weight this weekend in the Ebor at 57.5, with the top weight at 62.5. So it's quite a compressed rate sort of race this weekend, the Ebor. And that's going to have quite a big bearing. You'll see a lot of price movements this weekend, I feel, post-Ebor. Rockabill's a nice horse I bought, but we're going to look after him and save him for the autumn, and he's not qualified anyway. Of the local horses, this Supernova, he's a potential superstar. I love this horse. His biggest issue is he's not qualified. Now, he runs in the Rolling Mile this week, so he'd have to win that particular race to qualify for a Caulfield Cup. But even then, he's going to really struggle with weight. He's definitely got the class and the quality, but if you have a look at these guys that do well with the Europeans, it's the guys that have had a number of them, the Chris Lees, Chris Waller, Lloyd Williams, whoever his trainer is at the time. Guys like this, even Guy Hickmont's done really well. Danny O'Brien's done well. Anthony Freeman's done well. But the guys that haven't done well with them, they just struggle with them. They need to be trained differently, and that's my big, big concern with this horse, Supernova. I'm sure he'll look good tomorrow in the Rolling Mile, but I'm sure they'll fall into the same trap of running him every 2 or 3 weeks, and they give away too much advantage. If you got the big price, the 50 to 1, 100 to 1, something like that, you could possibly be really interested. I'd be more keen on a Caulfield Cup than a Melbourne Cup. I think that would be his best hope. Even though if he was coming with a European trainer, he'd probably be the one I'd want to be on out of all of them. He's just got a real texture.
When was the last time the Hawks had a Melbourne Cup run? I just did a quick search, and it might have been Niwot back in 2011.
Yeah,
it was.
Yeah, and if you remember from memory, did he qualify on the Saturday just to get into the race?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Yeah, and then prior to that was my lucky day. But, they're very good trainers, but they're very good trainers with sprinting colts, I find. That seems to be their niche. And to train a stayer and to win these big races, that you do need to have something extra about you and have that experience. And got plenty of experience, but they haven't done it, I suppose, and that's the question mark I've got.
Yep.
Red Verdon, he's Red Cadeau's brother. He's a really tough horse. A couple of seasons ago, he was just another good, solid horse without being anything special. But this year, he's sort of gone to another level. There's other European horses I'd want to be with, but at 100 to 1, I think he's a better than even chance that he'll come for the race, and I think he'll start shorter. So you would have to include him to some degree, even if you're just trading him. And the last horse I've got here is the horse we bought as well, Mustajeer. He's a horse that I'd probably like him better as a top 5 chance in a Caulfield Cup than a Melbourne Cup. He'll definitely stay. I just think he's got such a dynamic turn of foot. Those horses do really, really well in a Caulfield Cup. And sometimes a Melbourne Cup can suck that extra little explosiveness out of them. But I've bought him thinking he's a top 5 chance in both a Caulfield and Melbourne Cup and winning chance. But, you can't have them all, obviously. He'll be a really nice horse to follow through, like a Queen Elizabeth and BMW and those type of horses in the autumn as well.
And just quickly, there's a few which we haven't mentioned there. Avilius, Anthony Van Dyke. I'm just looking through the tab market now. Avilius won't go to the Melbourne Cup. Probably more a Cox Plate path, I think, isn't it?
Cox Plate? Yeah, I'd say his rating was okay in the BMW when he won that, but if you remember, all the connections and everything were worried that he wouldn't run the 24. And look, he did, but it wasn't as good as a rating as what his 2000 sort of stuff was, and he's your Cox Plate type horse.
And Anthony Van Dyke?
Yeah, from memory, they'll consider him, he's already won a Group 1 over there, they'll consider him too good to come to Australia, so I wouldn't touch him.
And just a few others which are in the market as well. Johannes Vermeer, Murder Glace, and I'm not sure if I'm saying this right, Neef Bosk.
Yeah, Neef Bosk is a dirty, rotten master craftsman, and they're a prick of a breed. All they do is they loom up like they got 10 gears there, and they find half a length. His form overseas was okay, but there was no substance to it. It'd be like back in, as good a horse as he was, horses like Red Excitement and these type of horses that kept running placings to Winks. He's got very, very good form on paper, but his individual efforts, there was no real substance there. He's just run behind good horses. So he's now in Australia. I don't give him any hope, to be honest, but people will fall into him because they'll see that he's got really good form lines around him, but I don't give him any hope.
They've even got Shao at $26. He had a hit out today at Canterbury, didn't he? He's not on the Melbourne Cup path.
Yeah, his main aim this prep will be a Metropolitan, and then he'll go Caulfield and Melbourne Cup. Again, if you have a look at his profile, he's an out-and-out stayer, so I don't really want to be with him until he gets to 2,400. And the Metrop, to be fair, is obviously a weaker Group 1 option. So I had a little double with him into my horse Danceteria into the Cox Plate the other day, and I got surprisingly really good odds about him in a Metropolitan, so I'd be keen to have him there. I just think, though, from what we spoke about earlier, it's just too hard for these Australian trained horses to be a genuine winning chance when they have to come up from scratch. And, we're nearly at the end of August and he hasn't had a run yet.
Yep.
So Ferraro's rating in the Sydney Cup, he got a gun ride, rated quite well the race. It's good enough to run top 5 in both races, but I see him as a 3rd to 6th type horse, not quite a top 2 and live chance. Chris is very happy with him, but like I said, they just give away too much advantage to these overseas horses with the campaign they're forced to undertake here with the way the programming is. That other horse, Meave, Glassies or whatever, I don't give her any hope, so happy to be against it.
And they've also got Ross Rapovich. Is he coming back?
Yeah. Yeah, no. From memory, he might have had his last run a while ago. I just don't like him. He was never much good over there, and like he's a Group 3 horse, I feel, and just not good enough.
A couple of others, they've got Stradivarius in there as well in the Melbourne Cup market. He won't be coming really.
Best staying horse in the world, and I wouldn't take 1,000 to 1 about the Melbourne Cup. He's just not going to come.
Yep. With Hold and also Yucatan.
Yeah, Yucatan. He's an interesting one. I had a look earlier, doing some form. I see he's nommed him for a Cox Plate. I think that'd probably be too sharp, given that we've now got this Japanese mare coming. But he would be one from a Caulfield Cup point of view. If you saw him step out in the next 2 weeks, you could possibly entertain. Our Caulfield Cups are generally not as strong as people might believe. And my big issue, though, there is I think he's had one run in 12 months or something. So I'll personally won't have a cracker on him, but I can understand how people would because he has got a bit of quality and class about him. But again, when you've had so many issues and not raced for such long, it's too hard for horses that, they get ring rusty, and like with all our footies and sports stars, they need regular competition and to stay at that level, not, stop-start type things like you get when you have injuries.
Yep. All right, we've gone through a fair few runners there. So your top 4, who are the ones you want to consider and want to have a bet with this far out?
Yeah, this is more along the lines of I think they'll start a lot shorter and you're a very good chance that they line up in the race. I'd be really keen Supernova at $51. You just got to be backing him, though, knowing that, A, he's not qualified at the moment, and B, he's really going to need to win the right race to get his weight up to actually make the Caulfield Cup. But if it was Caulfield Cup day tomorrow and he's as good as what I know he could be, I'd take $5. But so the $51 is a very rare gift, but it's you're taking a punt that the trainers place him and handle him right to actually get him there in the best possible condition and with the best setup. And that's my worry with that horse. But, those odds certainly justify that. This Raheen House of mine, I think you could really be confident to back him at $51. He's going to come. His first 2 runs this season have been lead-up runs. The E-Ball is going to be as good a race as the Melbourne Cup will be. And if he runs well here Saturday, I can see him getting slashed to $21 after the weekend, and he'll start a lot shorter than that come Melbourne Cup day if he's here fitting well. The next one, again, just looking for a little bit of value. I'm sure they haven't announced it yet, but if that Latrobe was coming from a Caulfield Cup point of view, the $31 is a massive, massive price. He's qualified. He's going to be in the race, and he's got a racing profile that would really suit Caulfield. He's sort of midfield or better, very tough horse, and I just think he's got a bit of a smell about him that they've left a bit in him early in the season. That's why he looked a bit common, and then the last couple of runs have been really strong. And with his racing style and whatnot, I know Lloyd doesn't necessarily set them for a Caulfield Cup, but that would be the race he could win, and the $31 is really nice. And then the other horse is that Gold Mount. I know he's coming, so you're going to get some type of opportunity to trade out of him. And I don't think he will start anywhere near $31 in a Melbourne Cup. So unless he hurt himself, he's going to start shorter than that. So that'll give people an opportunity to get their stake back or trade him and get a profit out of him. But, they're the 4 that I thought, maybe the odds were slightly in your favour and you've got a really good chance to get some options rather than just tear your ticket up where, as you can see, there's a lot of them that either aren't qualified or aren't coming, and they're, you're just going to be no hope by putting your money on.
Yep, there's some nice value there. Also, You've given us a bit of an idea of, things to consider with the Aussie trained horses and which race to back them in. Just want to quickly run through that philosophy.
Yep. So in punting in general, from a 2,400 metre point of view, which is obviously we're going to be talking about a Caulfield Cup, the statistics are heavily in your favour if you have a run in that preparation at 2400, or you're on a 7-day backup. They might have had a run in, say, a Herbert Power, and then they're on a 7-day backup into a Caulfield Cup. I think you'll find that'll be very deadly. So you just got to make sure from a Caulfield Cup point of view that they're not going from, a mile up to 2400 or 2000 to 2400, because the stats say it's just almost impossible to do. And then obviously the Melbourne Cup point of view, you won't go wrong backing horses that have had that 10,000 metres or more in their legs. And a really interesting thing is with the Australian horses, you just look at the preparation that they've had this prep, not their whole season, where in Europe you count their whole season, because basically they have one run a month, and those miles and that condition's in them already. So, I think we saw some iron horses like Red Cadeau. He was running here in the Cups and running with no form at all overseas, and he had 21,000 and 23,000. Willie Mullins bought a horse that had 26,000, and they all went out of their skin. And you'll see every year the horses that don't have the good form in the Melbourne Cup or perform poorly are those with 6,000 or 7,000 or even 8,000 metres in their legs. They just don't have the conditioning to do well. So you've got to keep those type of things in the back of your mind. And the way the Melbourne Cup is these days, top weights are lucky to be 58 these days, and a lot of the bottom weights are now 53 or 54. So it's not really a true handicap. It's more of a set weights and penalties. So you've just got to, always look at the official rating that some of these horses have, because sometimes you'll end up backing horses that are too far out of the ratings to realistically give these good horses a chance. The Ebor is going to be a very important lead up this weekend. You'll see there's probably 7 or 8 horses that are due to run this weekend that maybe have designs in coming to Australia. So look for that. I think they're the main things. If you can focus on that, and like with anyone's a member, they want to shoot through any questions on a particular horse or have a go at me because I've bagged one of their horses, let me know, and I'm happy to tell you why I think that. It's sort of when you're buying horses, you've got to have a very strong opinion, and you've got to have some data. I'm very big on data and times. You've got to have that to back you up, and I've got that. But that's why we're able to pick some of these horses apart and really know that they're just no hope even this far out.
And just more generally on your service, Luke Murrell's tips, it's been going really well in recent weeks. You're looking forward to having a big spring?
Yeah, I had one of my traditional down periods there a couple of months ago where we had sort of 6 or 8 weeks of horror, and I understand how, when you pay for tips, you expect everything that you get wins, but it's generally not always like that. But we're back nice and consistent now, and I find with my stuff, because I'm very time-based, as the tracks start to firm out, the form starts to be a little bit more reliable, the bias tracks are less evident, and the ratings basically come to the top. So I usually find from about here on, first week of September, actually, I've done a bit of a study. They are a lot more consistent, and our results really pick up as we get into these bigger and better races, I suppose. So, yeah, look, it's sort of, we've been lucky enough to win every year, and it's I'm very confident to say that we should sort of hit that 25,000 mark in profit for the year at least this year. I'm hoping to get it near 40, but yeah, either way, it'll be a profit, and just got to try and find that bit of value, because, like I said, it's not really about finding a winner. You've got to have the value associated with it to make sure that we can survive and build up the bank as we go.
And now's a good time to get involved with like you said, the track's getting firmer and the better horses coming back. Any horses caught your eye for the coming weeks or the carnivals outside of the Cups?
Yeah, look, I think you watch a horse like, as I mentioned, Supernova with a lot of interest. Chris Waller's very happy with Shraro. Apart from the other horses, obviously, outside of the obvious, this Libertini obviously looks an absolute freak, and she would be one I would be, you know, you want to be with her in just about anything she runs in from here on in. She looks good enough she could win the mire as an inexperienced 3-year-old. And, you know, being with Anthony Cummings, he's definitely going to give her that chance. So probably not telling people too much there with a horse like that, but she just looks extra special. And, yeah, look, you know, I've got a number of nice horses coming through. Probably the one I'm most excited about, I've got a horse called Urbino. He got beat the other day at Newcastle, which hurt badly, but I think in the next 6 months, if you follow a horse like him, you'll make a really nice profit and see a really nice group horse. And I've got a filly running this weekend called Attention Run. She'll probably struggle this weekend. She'll run well, but she won't be. I don't think she's good enough to win this weekend. But going forward, she could win a Newcastle Cup or something like that. She's a really nice filly.
Perfect. All right, Luke, thanks for that, mate. Really appreciate your insight and getting an in-depth analysis of the Cups, and hopefully it's a profitable spring.
Yeah, like I said, if anyone's got any questions or I've missed a horse or you want to ask a question, just email them in and the boys will forward them on and we'll come back to you.
Perfect. Thanks, Luke.
Okay, easy.